All right, come on in. I was trying to share out, but we are here with our headline news episode today. But before we get there, I'm going to have Dr. Galloway and Whitney share about our YouTube channel here.
Yes, so you'll see here, this is our YouTube channel. We have 58 subscribers, which is a lot more than we used to have. So we keep reeling people in. You can subscribe and then you'll know when we have a new episode, but it's also kind of easier to share this out from here because you can see the thumbnails. And if somebody doesn't have social media, this is a good place to share from. So come and subscribe if you're not already.
Yeah, I'm just finishing up sending this out to some of our groups here, and we can get this going. And one more group. We have kind of a fun, I feel like all of our episodes are fun, but we have kind of a fun episode today because we do have props, but we don't have props. I mean, we don't have this just to have our props, but we actually have been noticing through different posts and different social media outlets that there have been some stories relating to ears and hearing and just information that we wanted to put out there, but then also kind of give you our thoughts on it and our recommendations. And so as we cover some of these recent headlines that we've heard about, we thought that would be kind of fun to share about them and see what we think about them. So with that, I'm going to have Dr. Galloway take it away with her headline that she wants to share about here.
Yes. And so I actually saw this one myself coming over my feed and everything. So the headline is Florida doctor who didn't wear hearing aids during colonoscopy couldn't hear patient yelling. So hearing in the news. We'll share a link to the article so you can go there if you want. But essentially what happened is a doctor was hearing impaired and he was placed on, or he or she, I'm not sure, was placed on probation after he began performing a colonoscopy without his hearing aids and did not know the patient wasn't fully sedated. So the patient started to yell and he did not hear the patient. He didn't stop immediately. And then in a separate procedure performed that same day, he delegated part of the procedure to a surgical tech who is not a licensed doctor, which is also important information. So the consequences are he's placed on probation and fined $7,500 over 2 procedures. So we would like to point out that fine is around the cost of a set of hearing aids. So you should just get the hearing aids. You should wear them, especially if you're performing medical procedures on people and you might need to be able to hear them. But yeah, this was one that really, really made some headlines. I do have a question on, does this physician typically wear hearing aids, or was this more of just like, oh, that's, do they normally have them on every other day? Would be a question that I have as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I was reading through some of our boards because a lot of our boards with other audiologists, this was out for quite a while now because we've been seeing this story. But I think that people were assuming that this physician had maybe a severe hearing loss.
Okay.
Because without wearing hearing aids, and not being able to hear the patient yell, you would think. There are other questions that people had about why didn't anybody else in the room also not hear it, because typically when you have a colonoscopy, there's more than one person in the room, which then questions some of the other staff that may not have had their hearing aids in. I don't know. It's kind of to me, it's a little bit of a mess, not really having all the information. Yes. And I know the news outlets might not have been able to share it, or I don't know. But yeah, so definitely his fine of $7,500, you might as well just get the hearing aids. And then we just go over some of the other possible options that if he did have his hearing aids, or even in the OR or an operating room, what surgeons can do to hear better as well if they had their hearing aids in.
Yep. So there are some different like Bluetooth devices, like a remote microphone. So let's say you have like your first surgical assist or whatever, maybe they would be wearing it and the surgeon would be able to communicate with them more directly that way, or just be able to hear them better that way. Yeah, the severity of the hearing loss, I do kind of question that, because it does seem like you would have to be a very, very severe loss. I would guess that there's a lot of noise going on during a colonoscopy. I would think that the machine is probably really loud. But yeah, there would be more than one person in the room. So that doesn't quite add up. Yeah, so using some, number one, just wearing the hearing aids would have been the first step. And then also, using some of these other connectivity devices to just sort of help or enhance the listening situation in that event.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. All right. So that was one that has been around. So if you have any comments, questions about that particular article or the headline that we've seen, put it in the comments or share this out if somebody else might have another question here. But we definitely have some thoughts and some recommendations about that one. All right. Moving along. I think, Whitney, you're next with your headline.
Yes. So this headline is coming from People Magazine, and Dr. Phillips actually shared this with Dr. Galloway and I, and it's very interesting. So Melissa Gilbert reveals that she has a neurological disability called misophonia, dark and difficult part of my childhood. So this was just released in August of on the 20th, so 2 days ago. So that's like fresh off the press. I think we also have a link to this article as well. But just from some facts of the article, so the actress revealed that she sobbed when she learned that her intense reactions to sounds like chewing and clapping were actually due to a real and treatable condition. Everyday noises like the sounds of chewing, popping gum, the nails clicking, even clapping hands would provoke anger in her. And you have to think about how much of that is just common, like in our everyday life. She states that when she films scenes for the show in the schoolroom set, if any of the kids chewed gum or ate or tapped their fingernails on the table, I would want to run away so badly. My eyes would turn beet red and they would fill up with tears, and I would just sit there feeling absolutely miserable and horribly guilty for feeling so hateful towards all of these people that she loved. She said that for years, her family just thought she was a really fussy kid who would just glare at her parents and her grandmother and siblings with eyes full of hate, probably because they were provoking, that emotion in her by creating some noise. She goes, I just thought I was really rude and I felt really bad and guilty, which is an enormous component of misophonia. The guilt that you feel for these feelings of fight or flight is really isolating within the disorder. And Melissa Gilbert received help by doing cognitive behavioral therapy. So I know that Dr. Phillips does a lot of this types of treatment, and we'll get into that, but just some quick information about it is misophonia is a real thing. It's based on the neurophysiological model of sound and perception of sounds. And it's just an abnormal reaction to certain sounds. It doesn't matter how loud the sound is, the pitch of it, or things like that. It just causes an adverse reaction within a person. It's really common for people to start experiencing this around the ages of 9 through 13. Usually around the table, you have to think about people eating, forks moving, people chewing loudly. And it's easy to have the harshest reactions towards the ones that we love, which fits in really well with what she said about when she was acting and working with other, fellow actors and actresses and having these feelings. But Dr. Phillips has been working with patients with sound sensitivity, which includes hyperacusic. So sounds that, individuals perceive as being really loud when really, they're not that loud. They're just perceiving it as being misophonia and phonophobia. She's been doing this for the past 25 years, and she uses music therapy to help retrain the brain to reduce the reactions of the brain to certain sounds. So it's very, very beneficial to patients to help give them some of their life back. We often think of, audiologists, we're dealing with hearing loss, but there's so much more than just hearing loss.
Yeah. And I think that, like, just to say that it's a real thing, I think I was reading this article and she said, like, that was the first thing that just made her just feel at ease. And I think with sound sensitivity, we've done shows on this. I know that a lot of patients have come in for this for us. And it depends on the type of sound sensitivity that people have. So you have hyperacusis, which is what Whitney said, which is easily able to be diagnosed because we can do some uncomfortable listening levels or loudness discomfort level testing, and we can see if you have decreased sound tolerance or hyperacusis. Misophonia, you may not show that you have hyperacusis, but you may complain that certain soft level sounds are bothersome to you. So one of the sounds that and it's not so much that they're bothersome to you, but you have a physiological reaction. That's typically what people with misophonia say. And so sometimes, like with Melissa Gilbert, she said it's like the chewing of food or gum smacking together or slurping or sniffling, things that are going around the mouth and nose that are about, they're not very loud. But other people that have noticed it, the things that I can explain to you the best would be like fingernails on a chalkboard. You don't know why you have that physiological response, but for some people, when you do that, it's like the hairs stand on the back of your neck, right? And you kind of like shudder. And so that's a physiological response to a particular sound. And so for some people, it gets to the point where they avoid things. And so they don't go out. Or a lot of my misophonia patients, they don't eat with their families. And so they will make a plate of food and they will go eat in their room, or they'll wait till the family's done eating and then they'll come out and eat on their own. So it's very isolating. And so, I totally understand what she's talking about, and a lot of people don't know about it. And so again, this is why we're pulling up these headlines to talk a little bit more about things that are going on that are relevant, that might be in the news or affecting celebrities, but they're also affecting other people as well that are not celebrities, and it's a real thing. So we want to make sure that people understand that misophonia is out there. There are things that can help. Melissa Gilbert got help doing cognitive behavioral therapy. I do music therapy to help with people, to help retrain their brains in their perception of certain sounds. And then through my music therapy, I also help them get back into that dining room, or to help them get back to having those family dinners or meals together. And so a lot of the times that's misophonia. Phonophobia takes it to a step further, where they're really isolating themselves and where fear is involved. And so a lot of the times we partner with a clinical psychologist that take them from the part that we can do with retraining the brain and working on sounds, but then also giving them the coping mechanisms as well, and to get rid of that fear or that phobia. So that's what phonophobia is about. So we thought this was a really interesting article and headline, because it just came out. I think it was like on August 20th. So a couple days ago, I thought it was kind of interesting to talk about. And so we wanted to talk about what Melissa Gilbert has been going through, and then some of the different options that you can have to get better. So with that, we are going to go to our last headline. So a lot of these headlines, there was a lot of information, so we only kind of stuck with 3. Now, this next one is kind of interesting, because this one I actually heard about when I was on the radio, and it actually happened about a year ago. But I thought it was so interesting because it talks about pickleball, and I know pickleball is becoming very, very common, and it's a great exercise to get outside, or I know that there's indoor courts as well, but a lot of people are picking up pickleball, right? Like there's not a day that goes by that you don't know somebody that probably has pickleball, like they have fun playing it, or they get together, or whatever it is. So this I heard on the news and I thought it was kind of interesting. So let's put up the headline. And this headline's a little tricky. It says, inspired by Gandhi, couple goes on hunger strike over pickleball noise. Okay, so in my newspaper, this is what it says here. So it was in the Washington Post. And facts of this article: for nearly a year, an Indian couple, Rajneesh Dhawan, has complained to officials from Chilliwack. So his town is Chilliwack in British Columbia, about high decibel sounds or noises coming from 3 pickleball courts that are about 20 feet behind his property. And he said that he and his wife have endured auditory hallucinations, heart flutters, and insomnia since players started flocking to the courts in 2021. Rajneesh said the sounds became unbearable, and he said he slept poorly, and when he did rest, he awoke in the middle of the night hallucinating the noise of a ball striking a paddle. He's an English professor at a nearby university, and his wife is a dental hygienist, and they fell behind in their work, and they started to see therapists for the first time. So what they did was they tried to go on a hunger strikes because they had written letters to the city, and they had asked for the pickleball courts to be closed or only during certain times. But he and his wife decided to go on a hunger strike. So they literally stood in front of the pickleball courts, and when people would enter in, they told them that what was going on and how they were going to do a hunger strike until they actually closed down the courts. Well, people just kind of moved around them and ended up playing on the pickleball courts. So after failed hunger strikes and multiple letters, after a failed hunger strike, because it didn't really work, they eventually got nauseous and they had to eat. The city did finally agree to build an indoor pickleball facility, and they plan to close the courts near their home. So finally, and it was about a year later. So when I first heard this, I was like, what? But then the more I thought about it, I thought, okay, auditory hallucinations. When I first got my Apple Watch, and I don't know, and I don't sleep with my Apple Watch, but I know Dr. Galloway does. But I remember, like, with all of the tactile, notifications, even when I didn't have my watch on, I felt like, oh my gosh, something's buzzing me, right? And it was like a hallucination almost of the feel or the tactile, right? And I don't know if you guys have had that or not.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I have. It's like my psychosis. I'm like,
right.
Just took a shower or whatever,
so I don't. Oh my gosh, somebody's texting me, and I look down at my watch, and I'm like, oh, I don't have my watch on. So
yeah.
Well, I have to agree that this is something that's true, right? So we thought we'd talk a little bit about auditory hallucinations, or paracusis. And we did a show, I believe, on this, but I can't remember if we left it up or not. But this is all information from the Cleveland Clinic. So I'm going to close my newspaper real quick here from the headline story and talk a little bit more about auditory hallucinations. And so they happen when you actually hear voices or noises that aren't there. And the sounds may seem real, but they're not. And a person may perceive auditory hallucinations coming through their ears, or maybe on the surface of their body, in their mind, or somewhere like in the space around them, right? So it doesn't have to be like, oh, I locate it in my ears necessarily. And they can occur frequently. So it can be daily, or it can just be like randomly in an episode. And they're often associated with schizophrenia, okay? So we do have to put that out there, or other mental health conditions. But they can also happen for several other reasons, such as hearing loss, severe stress, PTSD, lack of sleep, extreme hunger. So if you think about this Indian couple, it could have been their stress or their lack of sleep, right? Medications, and it's not always a mental health condition. So just because you're having these auditory hallucinations doesn't necessarily mean that it's a mental health condition. I know that for us, some patients that have come in have even said like, oh yeah, I hear a particular music or a song that keeps playing in my head. And they're typically older people. And it could be something that they just remember and they associate a particular memory with it, right? And so that's also an auditory hallucination where they're starting to hear the song over and over and over again. And it might be something that they and their wife dance to, and their wife passed away or something like that. And so a lot of people experience songs playing over in their head. And that's another categorized as an auditory hallucination. Well, researchers estimate that about 5 to 28% of people in the United States actually experience auditory hallucinations. And they're the most common type of hallucination, which is very odd. You would think that with what you have heard or seen in movies or TV shows, that other hallucinations are more common than auditory hallucinations. Some people experience hallucinations that are called hypnagogic, which means that they're actually about to fall asleep and they notice something, that they're hearing, or they're hypnopompic hallucinations, which means they actually are hearing something as they're waking up. Now, again, I go back to 9/11 when I remember I was in California. It's one of those things where I remember exactly where I was, what was going on. And I was still in deep sleep, but I woke up to an alarm that was actually a radio show playing. And I remember on 9/11, I was standing on top of, I was dreaming, I was in that state, right? And I was standing on top of one of the Twin Towers looking down, and I saw a plane crash into the Twin Tower because I was probably just getting up, but hearing stuff on the radio, which put me on top of that building watching the plane go in. Like, I totally remember that. And it was the radio station, because I remember waking up and my husband saying, we need to go turn on the news. Like, this is crazy. And I remember that was 9/11. And so I think that a lot of that has to do with it as well, right? Is when you're getting up or when you're falling asleep, you're in this weird state where it's very suggestive. And so I think with auditory hallucinations, with the hypnagogic or hypnopompic, I hope I'm saying that right, those hallucinations occur when you're either falling asleep or waking up. So some of the theories, and so to go back, about 70% of people actually experience one of these. But some of the theories that cause auditory hallucinations, sometimes people think that they're just this spontaneous activation of the auditory network in your brain. Maybe it's an imbalance of dopamine or serotonin or neurotransmitters. And so a lot of the times people think that that might cause that auditory hallucination. Well, we have a few percentages that I think is kind of interesting. So percentage of people that have had auditory hallucinations, 75% of people that have had auditory hallucinations also have schizophrenia, or they're hearing other voices. 20 to 50% of people that have had auditory hallucinations have a bipolar disorder. 40% have had PTSD or post-traumatic stress disorder. 14% have an anxiety disorder. 10% have major depression. And auditory hallucinations occur in about 16% of adults with hearing impairment. So that is our population that we would see. And it can be either in the form of tinnitus, which is what we've talked about before, right? Sounds that aren't necessarily being produced by your ears, but you're hearing it, or more complex hallucinations like speech music. Like we said, people come in and they say they hear a song on repeat over and over and over again. So that's what we see, is these auditory hallucinations with people that have hearing loss. And treatments for auditory hallucinations could be psychotherapy, which would be cognitive behavioral therapy, hallucination focused integrative treatment, distraction techniques, or desensitization. So that would be something that we would do, or I would do, because I can do desensitization type of sound therapy with people. Support groups, maybe improving your sleep and health, and avoiding alcohol and medications. And so a lot of information, I know, but we thought it was kind of interesting. I do believe that this couple did have auditory hallucination of that pickleball sound. I don't doubt that at all. And unfortunately, it was during their most quietest times when they were going to sleep at night that they heard that pickleball sound. And so it probably then interfered with their sleep. And it's just this vicious cycle that goes around and around and around. So I'm glad that this couple did finally get they approved that the pickleball courts will now be indoors for them. But I just still don't know how long that they would continue to have that until it finally wears off, or if they have to go and have therapy. I know that they were seeking therapists at the time, but I thought it was kind of interesting to bring up. I don't know if you guys have any thoughts.
Yes. My favorite story about that is it was maybe like 5 or 6 years ago, but it was an elderly patient and her adult daughter came in with her. and she had just moved into a new, it was like an independent living facility, but there was a lot of other people, like apartment style. And she said that people kept listening to loud music. And her daughter was like, I don't think so. It's a senior community. And she said, what kind of music are they listening to? And she had a specific song from the 1930s that she said that they were just playing at max volume on repeat. And her daughter was like, I don't think anyone's playing that song. It is a senior living community. It's possible. But yes, she was 100% just hallucinating that one song, kind of over and over and over. But it was funny when asked, because it was a song from like the 1930s. So it was a very, very old song that was likely not, really being played.
Like, I really think about that type of story, and it reminds me like of The Notebook, or like at the end of Endgame, Avengers Endgame, that one, long ago they danced to each other, and there's so many memories there that I feel like that's the song that plays over and over that they hear, or that's that auditory hallucination. I just feel like there's so much love and memory or something with those connections that that's what they hear over and over and over again. Well, I mean, it just gave me chills when you were telling that story, because I was like, oh, I bet you it's a sweet little couple, and they just,
Yes. Well, and I think it's important to highlight, an imbalance of dopamine and serotonin. So those are your feel-good neurotransmitters. So if you take any sort of an antidepressant medication, that's what's being sort of meddled with. And so if you're not taking it regularly, or if your dose is not high enough, or if it's too high, or I just want to highlight that, because a lot of people take antidepressant medication and might not be super diligent about making sure it's taken every day, or, taking a little harder look at it, because sometimes just being inconsistent or not having the right dosage or moving to a different one might be helpful for somebody. So,
yeah. And we posted all of the articles that we had talked about today in the comments. So whether you're watching on Facebook or my LinkedIn or our YouTube channel, all of the links to those articles that we found these headlines in are located there. So you can kind of read a little bit more about that. So, well, if you guys have any other interesting headlines you want to send our way, we can have another discussion. And we can definitely look these up and give you our thoughts and recommendations, or just thoughts really sometimes about other things that are happening in this world that might be related to ears or the hearing. So with that, we will be back again next week with another episode. So stay tuned. We'll see you guys then.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.